I've started working on the actual mudguards for the car. I have my paper template that I made, and I've traced around that onto some 1mm steel sheet. To get the most out of the sheets, it actually takes up quite a bit of steel, so to make the most of the steel and also to make this a bit more manageable, because this is quite a big floppy thing, I decided to split it into two parts, and I weld the two parts back together after I've cut it. Now, to cut the steel, cutting it by hand would be really painful. So I've got my electric shears here. These things are pretty pricey. I think these were $500, $600 New Zealand dollars. So they're not cheap, but they're just so good. They go through the sheet steel like anything. And to cut out these sort of curves and things is just dead easy. So for doing a lot of this sort of stuff, these are really worth getting. I've already cut out one set. This is for the rear guards. So you can sort of see the sheet steel here. I've TIG welded it together down the middle. And then I actually ran it through the rollers to get it flat. So that's all now one piece. There is the height of the guard, and then enough on the bottom for a lip that I can do the wide edge. That's what I've been experimenting with tonight. So these are some of my test pieces I've been doing for doing a wide edge. And what I've found is the easiest way for me to do this is you need to fold an edge up 90 degrees. And you can just do that with drawing a line and then hammering over an edge, bringing the edge up. I found I'm not very good at that, so I've been cheating. And what I did is, these are some rollers I've made up for my bead roller. I'd already made these a while ago. This bottom roller was actually flat, but what I've done is machined a little groove in it. So just on the little lathe there, machine this groove, and now I can roll a sort of indentation along the edge of the steel where I want the mark to be. So it's all a bit tricky with one hand, but you can use the dividers to draw your line where you want to make the fold, and then there's kind of a line there already. It's not actually the one I've drawn, but we can show it in this. If I then run this through the rollers, I've got my little foot pedal down there. That gives me a break line. So it hasn't actually put much of a fold in it, but it's enough that now when I try to bend that panel, it's going to want to bend along that break line. What I then do is use my little slotted steel stick thing, and I've been using that to manually bend this up to 90 degrees, and then I just tied it all up on with a hammer and dolly, and that's what got me my 90-degree edge. And then it was just really a matter of hammering it around, and I just used various dollies and things. It went a bit wrong on the end there. I've been playing with this. I actually put that through the rollers and it took the curve out of it, which was interesting. But in the middle there, that's kind of how it's supposed to be. This one, I then experimented with putting the roll in the side, using these dies on the roller, and that's what gives me that curve. And you can see this is all just temporary and hacked together. This would be the example of the top piece. So this has the curve off the top of the guard, and it's had that edge rolled over in the bead rollers, and it's had a little bit of shrinking just to keep it curved. And then you can see that this piece also has a curve, and that will once you've actually made it all fit nicely, you fit those two together like that to give you that 90 degree, and then weld along that edge. And then hammer and dolly it to make it all nice and smooth again. So it was quite interesting doing this little test piece. It goes a bit sort of unflat. When you bend this flange up, it actually makes the metal curve, but by the time you've hammered it all the way around the wire, it goes flat again. And then I was able to just easily put this radius on it. So I think that should work. There's all sorts of ways you can do this, but I should then be able to TIG weld that all the way along the edge, and that'll give me my guard with the deep surround and the wide edge. That's what I'm hoping anyway. So the next thing to do is mark these up for the flange, run them through the roller and bend that up, and then I'll wire these edges. These should then still be relatively flat, and then I put it through the roller with the radiusing die and roll that radius, and then I make the top piece, which will need a little bit of crown that way, which I'll do on the English wheel, as well as the curve that way, and put the radius on that, and then weld all the bits together. I'm still a little bit vague on how I terminate the wire at the ends, and how I finish this bit off at the ends when these are sort of together like that. So this one's kind of an experimental one. I'll leave the wire loose at the end here and then figure out how to finish it off when I actually get there. For some reason I just can't get that straight in my head at the moment. But I think that should more or less work. We'll see how it goes. So now I've gone through and started bending up the flange with my little slotted bar. Just sort of fits over that, and you just bend it up. I've gone all the way around. You can see at the end here where it needs a little bit of shrinking and stretching. You get the puckers, which means this needs to be shrunk into itself. And so the next step I do is go around with the hammer and dolly. I'm using a curve-faced hammer, and I'll put the steel block behind here and just go around and clean up this flange. I've already done the other one, which is sitting over here. You can see that's now bent up at 90 degrees. So the next step on that would be bending the wire to fit, and then clamping the wire in place and starting to hammer the metal around the wire. It's starting to get a bit late here, so I'll probably just hammer up this flange and then I'll stop there. So I think I've finished all my hammering for the night. I've got these two side pieces with the flanges ready to wrap the wire around. You can see how the panels distort a little bit when you bring up that edge, but I think once it's all wrapped down it'll go flat again. At least I'm hoping so. If not, I'll have to hammer it flat. I did have to turn the bead roller around in the vise, because those panels are so long. When you're trying to roll them, they have to roll through and curve around. But that worked fine. You can also see just on the back of the bead roller here where I welded on stiffening bars. This is made from, I think it's about 12mm thick steel plate, but it's not rigid enough. Just with the plate that it comes with, it will actually warp. You can see it even when you put thin metal in here. If you really clamp down on it, you can see all this twisting. So I strengthened it up with these box sections, which seem to have helped. And that's just the back of the wiper motor there, and the chain drive on it, and the little controller. It seems to be working quite well doing it this way. It definitely made it easier to bend that flange up. I'm just not skilled enough to be able to do that just with a hammer and dolly. One thing Joss suggested was, when I did this edge, to do it basically with this still attached to the sheet of steel. So if you imagine you've got a big flat sheet of steel and you just cut out the curve on the edge and then hammer and fold that up, because it's much easier to slide the hammer and dolly on the flat piece of metal. But what I've actually found is doing it this way hasn't been too bad, and I was able to use my large round lump of steel here and sort of lay that down along here and sort of roll it along as I hammered, sort of twisted it round. It's hard to explain, but that seems to have done the trick, and I think that should work okay.